What if I told you a band got so big by copying another band that the original band's management tried to sabotage them? They were being accused of being cheap knockoffs, got kicked off a tour for fighting with Def Leppard, and then fired their own founder for telling a newspaper just how much sex and drugs they were actually doing. They hit number one, sold millions of records, and then crashed so hard their own members said the albums should be burned. Here's how Switzerland's biggest rock export blew up and then fell apart.
Like, subscribe. Thank you.
So Krokus starts up in Solothurn, Switzerland back in 1975. The guys behind it are Chris von Rohr and Tommy Kiefer. And at first, they're not even a hard rock band. They're playing progressive rock, more complicated, artsy stuff. On their first album, the guitar player Tommy is the one singing. And then for the second record, Chris, who was originally the drummer, decides he'll be the lead singer now. The lineup is a total mess, but they managed to get a solid group together with Fernando von Arb on guitar, Jörg Nageli on bass, and Freddie Steady on drums. They start getting some traction in Switzerland. Their third album, called Painkiller, gets recorded in just 6 days. It's raw and loud, but nobody really knows what they're trying to be. And Chris von Rohr's singing just is not cutting it. The record is so all over the place it even has 5 different album covers for different countries. The band is a bit of a joke, a prog rock act with a drummer for a singer who really can't sing, playing music that doesn't even know what it is. But then everything changes. The band goes to see AC/DC play live, and it's like a light bulb goes on. This is it. This is the sound that they want. They decide to completely ditch the old style and go all in on this hard-driving, bluesy rock sound. The first thing they need is a real singer, somebody who can actually belt it out. So in 1979, they hire this guy, Marc Storace. He's from Malta, and he has these incredible pipes, the kind of voice that can scream in the third octave without sounding like he's straining. It's a perfect fit. Marc is so committed to this new Krokus that when AC/DC singer Bon Scott dies in 1980, he actually turned down an offer to audition to replace him. And if you listen to the voice, it's pretty darn uncanny. Nevertheless, Marc thinks Krokus is on the verge of something big and he wants to see it through. He doesn't want to move to Australia anyway. Who does? But with Storace on board, they released the album Metal Rendez-vous in 1980, and it's a game changer. It's their first big international hit, and it defines their sound. Suddenly, metal fans all over the world know who Krokus is, but right away there's a problem. The biggest problem. Marc Storace sounds almost exactly like Bon Scott. And the music sounds exactly like AC/DC. So what do people do? Well, they start calling them a ripoff, a cheap clone. It's a label that will chase them for their entire career. And the album itself has other issues as well. The cover art is this cheesy picture of a car crash, and the English lyrics are a disaster. In one song, they sing Streamer in the Night, when they meant to sing Screaming in the Night. It's embarrassing, but it's selling. The next album, Hardware, released in 1981, leans into it even more. They even hire an engineer who worked on AC/DC's Highway to Hell. And the record has a song on it called Smelly Nelly, with these awful lyrics that even Marc Storace admitted made him cringe. But the real darkness is happening behind the scenes. The band's founding guitar player, Tommy Kiefer, has a serious heroin addiction going on. It gets so bad that they have to kick him out of the band mid-tour. 5 years later, at just 34 years old, he chose to call it quits on everything. Life too. So now the band is getting bigger, and so is the drama. While they're recording their next album, one vice at a time, they end up in the same studio complex as AC/DC. And the tension is thick. AC/DC's management is so worried about the Krokus clones that they allegedly get them blocked from playing the huge Monsters of Rock festival in 81. They think Krokus would be too strong an opening act, which is another way of saying that they don't want people hearing how similar they sound side by side. And then Krokus plans to call their album Long Stick Goes Boom, but they have to change it because AC/DC has a song with a cannon sound effect on their new album For Those About to Rock, and they didn't want any confusion. So when the album finally comes out, Chris von Rohr stirs the pot, calling it the album AC/DC never made. It's a direct pot shot, and it turns to making just those comparisons even worse. So in 1983, they reached their absolute peak with the album Headhunter. And for this one, they switched things up. Instead of just copying AC/DC, they start copying Judas Priest. They hired producer Tom Allom, who just finished making Judas Priest's legendary Screaming for Vengeance. And they even get Rob Halford to sing backup vocals on the song Ready to Burn. The move works. Headhunter becomes their biggest album ever. Goes gold in the US, hits number 25 on the Billboard charts. The single Screaming in the Night is a massive hit, MTV puts its insane over-the-top music video, which cost $250,000 to make, into heavy rotation. Krokus is on top of the world, opening for bands like Def Leppard on a huge US tour. And that's when it all starts to unravel. On the Def Leppard tour, Marc Storace starts getting a big head. He ignores instructions from the headliner's crew. He starts copying Def Leppard singer Joe Elliott's onstage banter word for word, right before Elliott goes on stage himself. It all comes to a head when Krokus's manager, a guy named Butch Stone, gets into a physical fight with Def Leppard's drummer Rick Allen, and he punches him. And that's the last straw. Krokus gets kicked off the tour. And folks, before you throw too much shade Butch's way, just know that Rick still had both arms at that point. So at this point, the band is a mess of ego and excess. Chris von Rohr, the founder, can see it all happening. He gives an interview to a Swiss newspaper and just lays it all bare. Talks about all the groupies, the parties, the drugs, says there's too much success and too much of everything, admitting that the white powdery stuff was everywhere. He talks about the nonstop touring and recording schedule was leading to burnout on the road, burnout with drugs, burnout with women, not enough sleep. And the manager, Butch Stone, sees the interview and completely freaks out. He thinks Chris is making the band look bad. So in late 1983, at the height of their fame, Krokus fires its own founder for telling the truth about their lifestyle. Years later, Marc Storace would admit that firing von Rohr was a big mistake. Without Chris's guidance, the band completely loses its way. So in 1984, they released The Blitz. It's a total sellout. They ditched the heavy metal sound for a slick, poppy, glam rock style, trying to cash in on the trend. Critics hate it, but it actually sells well and goes gold. They actually did their wild cover of Ballroom Blitz on this one. And that was pretty much the lead single. And for people into more of the heavier sound of the day, they loved it, but it still did not surpass the original in any way, shape, or form in terms of sales. But of course, the drama never stops. They get into a long-running feud with none other than Dee Snider from Twisted Sister. Apparently, Snider's wife designed some stage clothes for them, but Krokus didn't like them, refused to pay, and even threatened her. Dee got pissed and held a grudge for years, telling people in the industry not to work with them. By 1986, Krokus is desperate. They released an album called Change of Address. Turns out to be a critical and commercial failure all the way. The record company forced them to soften everything, take the edge off the guitars and vocals, try to get radio hits. It sounds nothing like Krokus. And Chris von Rohr, who wasn't even in the band at the time, later said that the album should have been burned. In 1988, they tried to fix everything. They bring Chris back, an attempt to make a return to their old heavy sound with the album Heart Attack. Marc Storace pours everything he's got into the lyrics, hoping to save the band, but it's too late. Music scene is changing. A couple years later, you'd have grunge on the horizon. Meanwhile, everything going on during that time just had much more of an intensity to it. Bands were shredding, singing high, or just kicking out the power ballads. The band members were exhausted, completely fried as they put it. And after the album fails to make a splash, Marc Storace and Fernando von Arb quit. The band essentially disintegrates. For the next decade, Fernando is the only original member left, and he keeps the Krokus name alive by releasing a string of weak albums with different singers that nobody remembers. And after years in the wilderness, Marc Storace finally rejoins the band for good in the early 2000s. They released an album called Hellraiser in 2006 that actually goes gold in Switzerland. Seems like maybe there's still a spark. But then in 2007, the classic lineup, von Rohr, von Arb, Storace, Steady, and guitarist Mark Kohler get together for a Swiss TV show. The chemistry is still there. They decide to officially reunite, bearing old grudges and finally appreciating what they had. And this reunion was a huge success. In 2010, they released Hoodoo, which everybody agrees is a true return to form. They're superstars again in their home country. Tragedy struck, though, when they lost one of their former drummers, Danny Crivelli, who died after falling from a bridge. But the band pressed on, releasing Dirty Dynamite that same year, which also goes platinum in Switzerland. In 2018, feeling like they came full circle, they decided to go out on top. They announced their Adios Amigos farewell tour for 2019. They make a point saying they want to pull the plug for real, unlike other bands with eternal farewell tours. A not so subtle dig at groups like the Scorpions, Ozzy, the band that should not be named, and so forth. But then the pandemic hits in 2020, and the tour gets postponed. The delay gives them time to think. Marc Storace is heartbroken by the idea of it all ending. He says the word forever is just too heavy. And then in 2024, 6 years after announcing their retirement they change their minds. Marc Storace announces that Krokus is reborn, says the band feels fresh again and that everything is going according to plan. They start touring again to celebrate their 50th anniversary, playing festivals across Europe, where they're still treated like rock royalty. The band itself decides they don't want to do any more long tours in America, but Storace, full of energy, starts his own solo band to bring the classic Krokus songs back to the US. A man still screaming in the night, not streaming, determined to have the last word.